Welcome, fellow seekers of the strange and unnerving. It's Michael here, your guide through the unknown, with another tale to send shivers down your spine. Tonight on Ghost Stories Unleashed, I bring you the haunting tale of Eldermoor Manor, a tale that clutches at the shadows of reality itself. And if you dare, reach back into the midnight depths of your own fear-driven imagination. Nestled in the heart of an unyielding forest, far from the safety of city lights, lie the ruins of Eldermoor Manor, once the stately homestead of the enigmatic Margrave family, who vanished under circumstances shrouded in mystery. The manor now stands as a relic of forgotten grandeur, a vast shadow towering over the tangled underbrush. Our tale begins with Isabella Mathers, a tenacious journalist with an insatiable curiosity, driven by whispers of the manor's dark history and the unexplained vanishings linked to its name. What secrets does Eldermoor hold? What specters lurk amidst its dilapidated halls? And what dark echo from the past seeks to exact its toll on those who dare encroach upon its haunted precincts? With only a tattered journal discovered in the ruins, a remnant of the manor's last occupants, as her guide, Isabella must navigate a labyrinth of cryptic messages and unnerving apparitions. Her journey becomes a perilous dance between reality and the supernatural, unraveling far more than just family secrets. She uncovers a malevolent force that threatens to rip apart the very fabric of existence. As Isabella delves deeper, each layer peeled back reveals more of a terrifying truth, unsettling connections, bloodlines tangled with curses, and a doorway to a realm where reality and nightmare blur. Join me as I recount Isabella's spine-chilling encounter, her desperate struggle against forces that defy understanding. What lies waiting for her within those crumbling walls? Will she emerge, her sanity intact, bearing the burden of truths best left buried? And most crucially, will you listen? This is the story of the haunting of Eldermoor Manor. Let's venture into the unknown together, if you dare. Besides, who said the darkness wasn't inviting? Isabella Mathers tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear as she read over her notes one last time, her fingers drumming lightly on the steering wheel of her rented sedan. The road leading to Eldermoor Manor was as desolate as she'd expected, winding, potholed, and canopied by ancient trees that seemed to whisper among themselves. With a deep breath, she stowed the notebook in her bag and stepped out into the cool mist of early morning. The manor loomed in the distance, a hulk of dark stone and twisted ivy, part of the landscape yet somehow apart, as though time itself had drawn a line around it. "Looks like no one has been around here for ages," Isabella muttered, her voice swallowed by the fog. She adjusted her leather satchel over her shoulder and trudged up the path to the manor, gravel crunching beneath her boots. As Isabella approached the manor's foreboding entrance, the massive double doors, worn by time and neglect, creaked open, a welcome that felt eerily anticipatory. The chill in the air seemed to leach into her bones, and Isabella couldn't help the shiver that danced along her spine, a sensation she quickly dismissed. "Get it together, Mathers," she chided herself, taking a bold step inside. Her voice echoed softly in the dim entrance hall, a cavernous space lined with dust-choked chandeliers and a grand staircase that led the eye upwards into shadow. The air within was stale, tinged with mildew and the lingering hint of something metallic and far less identifiable. Bookshelves stood sentinel along the walls, their volumes coated in layers of dust, silent witnesses to the passage of time. "All of this for a story," she whispered, setting her bag down gently as she withdrew her phone, planning to capture the eeriness that enveloped her. But just as she aimed the lens, drizzling light from the shattered windows above, Her battery died inexplicably, leaving her momentarily stunned. "Of course," she sighed, shaking her head at her own lack of preparation. "Looks like it's just you and me, old place." And what a place it was. Isabella began to explore. Each room she peeked into a testament to faded opulence. Exquisite tapestries hung limp on walls, their colors bleeding into threads of gray. And elegant furniture stood stiffly in rooms choked with time, tales trapped in their silence. As Isabella moved deeper into the house, guided by a map in her mind crafted from the private journals and scant records she had gathered, she soon reached a narrow passage leading downwards. Her curiosity piqued as she descended the stairs, spiraling into the underbelly of the manor, her footsteps cushioned by layers of dust. This was where stories diverged, where the supposed hauntings truly began. It was in the damp basement that she found a door ajar, a sliver of light suggesting the world beyond it was somehow more alive than the hushed darkness surrounding her. Peeking inside, Isabella discovered a study or reading room preserved as if left in haste. Papers and books were strewn across every conceivable surface, eager for attention. "An investigator's treasure," she murmured, pulling out an old leather-bound journal that lay open on the desk, fragile pages yellowed but just legible. The journal belonged to one Alistair Margrave, detailing nothing more thrilling than accounts of livestock and estate issues, until the entries took a darker turn, recounting repairs on the old chapel and a library that apparently no one knew existed. Uncanny, Isabella mused, a tinge of excitement in her voice. Why hide a library? And why speak of it as if it were alive, capable of influencing more than just thoughts? Determined to uncover more, Isabella returned to the ground floor, the adrenaline of discovery propelling her up the stairs. With solitude her only companion, she moved through the manor like a ghost herself, exploring rooms where portraits seemed to follow her with judging eyes. In what once might have been a ballroom, Isabella's eye caught another anomaly, a peculiar gouge in the wooden floor, as though something heavy had been dragged across repeatedly. Kneeling for a closer look, her fingertips traced its groove. A secretive chill swept over her skin, leaving her to wonder at its significance. "Who were you, Alistair, and what was your secret?" She pondered aloud. Her voice vanished into the ether, unanswered, but hovering like a breath, a spectral audience to her thoughts. Here, within these desolate halls and whispers of history, Isabella sensed she was on the precipice of a story unlike any she had ever pursued, a tale of mystery and spectral legend intertwined. Her professional instincts spurred her on, her heart conflicting with the tangled emotion the decay evoked. "Every house has a history," she declared to the silence, self-assured despite the eerie atmosphere, "and every history has ghosts. But I intend to put this one to rest, one way or another." She knew the risks, professionally, personally. Stories like this, where the line between reality and fiction blurred, could consume those unprepared to confront them. But even as doubt nibbled at her resolve, Isabella felt invigorated, obsessed almost, by the narrative she slowly wove around her. Her quest that day, though incomplete and riddled with questions, left her with a sense of purpose and an uncanny connection to the manor and its mysteries. The rhythm of her heartbeat eventually synchronized with the pulse of Eldermoor itself, setting a tempo to which she knew she must dance, partners entwined in a tale still unfolding. As twilight settled outside, draping the manor in hues of gray and purple, Isabella paused in her searching. Standing in front of a dusty, distorted mirror, her reflection fragmented within the cracked glass, she whispered a solemn promise. "I'll find your truth, even if it takes the darkness itself speaking." Isabella's words hung suspended, caught in the web of shadows now curling in from the corners of the room. Her narrative was only just beginning, but already it was strong in its enchantment, each step deeper into the manor, binding her irrevocably to Eldermoor's haunting embrace. With each turn of the corner, each shadow embraced, Isabella was unwittingly bound, interwoven with the tale she sought to uncover, tethered to a past and fate yet to be revealed. And so she knew as she lingered on the threshold of the acquired knowledge that returning would be inevitable, her curiosity both her strength and her damnation. The soft glow of Isabella's lantern cast elongated shadows that seemed to brush against the walls with each hesitant step she took. The echo of her footsteps was a companion, quiet yet faithful, as she wound her way through the darkened hallways of Eldermoor Manor. Above, the wind keened softly, a ghostly lullaby that seemed to whisper promises she did not quite want to understand. Nestled into her makeshift camp in the once opulent parlor, Isabella tugged her coat tighter, warding against the chill that clung stubbornly to the corners of the room. Setting her notebook on the floor beside her, she reviewed her findings, filling the silence with her own presence. Just shadows and whispers so far, she narrated into her voice recorder, common in places ripe with history and memory, especially those heavily linked to tales of hauntings. What's true and what's imagination is yet to be determined. She switched off the recorder, deciding sleep was the best preparation for whatever lay ahead. Just as she was making herself comfortable on the worn sofa, the sensation of being watched prickled along her spine. She shook it off. "Mind tricks, Mathers," Isabella muttered to herself. "Nothing here but what you bring with you." Yet as she lay, the truth did not feel quite as simple. The tranquility was marred by the faintest voice, indistinct but insistent, layering itself over the backdrop of creaks and groans characteristic of an old house settling into night. At first, she thought it an echo of the wind, or perhaps a trick of acoustics in these curious halls. But then she understood. It carried a melody, a vibration subtly different from the ambient noises of the night. "Only my thoughts," Isabella assured herself, shutting her eyes tighter as if to barricade her mind from the unknown. And yet, curiosity burned within her, an ailment and a balm she could not deny. Intent on dismissing the uncanny, Isabella eventually succumbed to the bone-heavy weariness draped over her. She let herself drift, half aware of the deeper rhythms of the house playing its nocturne. It was a startled gasp that drew her back, the darkness around her twisting with colored motes, tiny apparitions that ebbed and flowed, forming nebulous shapes. Shadows skittered just beyond the lantern's light, more liquid than solid, undulating in an eerily organic dance. "What do you want?" Isabella challenged quietly, but the room responded with nothing more than the continued symphony of murmurs. As much as she ached to leap up and dissect this menagerie of mystery, she found herself rooted instead, heart pounding a loud tattoo in her chest. When at last Isabella pried herself from her daze, she noted the softness of dawn pressing against the windows. She had spent the twilight hours somewhere between wakefulness and dream. She stretched stiff muscles from the night's uneasy tangle, shrugging off the remnants of those strange visions. Determined to make sense of the experience, Isabella girded herself for the day and stepped into the dim corridor, setting off on an exploration to find anyone who might know more of Eldermoor's latest quirks. It wasn't long before she encountered Edgar, the manor's caretaker, as she suspected she might. She had read about him, a reclusive figure, seldom seen or spoken of in the accounts she had accessed. Yet, finding him unassumingly tending to the only remaining sprig of life in Eldermoor, the garden, filled her with a renewed sense of hope. "Good morning," she ventured, stepping out with an air of ease she didn't entirely feel. Edgar glanced up, pausing in his work to regard the newcomer with eyes that held the color of twilight. "It's a rare visitor who braves these halls," he replied, his voice a textured melody, rich with experience. "Is there something you're seeking?" "Answers," Isabella admitted, feeling that old warmth of shared curiosity. "I've heard stories, as I'm sure you know. I'm here to see if there's truth, and maybe to tell a story of my own." Edgar nodded, somehow neither approving nor condemning. "Truth is a double-edged sword, miss," he said, meeting her gaze with solemn consideration. "Sometimes it's best left unnamed, for fear of what it may unleash." "Surely you don't mean that?" Isabella countered. "The history here is rich, terrifying possibly, but it's a story worth telling." "It's not the history that frightens," Edgar intoned softly. "It's what history leaves behind, lingering in the echoes of those who have not truly left." "You mean ghosts?" Isabella queried, half scoffing but enthralled by Edgar's calm assurance. Edgar merely offered a hint of a smile, accompanied by a knowing look. "A place like this," he gestured vaguely toward the sprawling estate, "does not easily shake free of its past." Intrigue flared in Isabella. "And you? How long have you worked here?" "You seem unfazed by the manor's reputation. Long enough to see the stories become like family," he conceded, attention returning to the earth beneath his hands. "The Margraves were good people, burdened by something beyond their grasp. What remains is their story, hanging unwilling to be forgotten. Do you think you'll ever leave?" Edgar shook his head slowly, a hint of sadness beneath the stoicism. "I'm where I'm meant to be." "So you know the secrets then?" Isabella probed further, meeting his tranquility with guarded optimism. "I know them well enough to respect them," Edgar replied, lifting a weathered hand to shade his eyes from the growing light. "But it's respectful silence rather than understanding that moves the heart of this house." Isabella considered his words, finding a kind of solace in the ambiguity. The fragments of her night, whispers and shadows among them, seemed to coalesce slightly. "Just say you'll help me," Isabella murmured, leaning into the connection she felt with Edgar. "I need to uncover what truly happened here." This time Edgar's smile was more genuine, a prelude to something hopeful. "Stories have a way of finding their own end," he murmured. "Perhaps what you seek will find you." With that, their conversation ebbed naturally into silence, Edgar returning to his work, and Isabella, her thoughts shadowed by the weight of mysteries yet to illuminate. Whether she felt fear or a separate resolve, Isabella could not yet discern. All she knew was that Eldermoor Manor had something vital to offer, and she, for however long it took, would unravel each tangled thread, if she dared. The early afternoon sun filtered weakly through the dusty, grimy windows of the manor, its light tracing languid patterns upon the floor. Isabella ventured through Eldermoor's forgotten chambers with a renewed sense of purpose, her mind lingering on Edgar's cryptic guidance from that morning. The building was a puzzle, certainly, its pieces scattered throughout the creaky interior, hidden in crannies and behind walls that seemed eager to guard their secrets. As Isabella sifted through the debris, her fingers brushed against something distinctly unlike the crumbling papers and fabric remnants. It was solid, cool, tucked neatly beneath a loose floorboard in what she presumed had been Lillian Eldermoor's private quarters. "What's this now?" she murmured to herself, crouching down with curiosity ablaze in her eyes. The object revealed itself as a diary, seemingly inconspicuous yet brimming with a quiet promise. Its binding was frayed but intact, whispering of stories locked behind years of solitude. With caution, she eased open the cover, the spine creaking softly, a sigh escaping centuries of oblivion. The pages were delicate, their edges yellowed yet strong enough still to cradle the words etched in a delicate, almost frantic hand. Lillian Eldermoor, Isabella read aloud, a chill running down her spine. Let's see what drove you to secrecy. The initial entries were benign, at best mundane considerations of daily manor life. But they evolved into something far darker, a vivid portrait of sanity slipping ever so slowly under the veil of an obsession. Lillian's elegant scrawl painted a tale of an ancient ritual, whispers of power and salvation bound to the manor's very bones, rituals conducted within the labyrinthine depths of Eldermoor's expansive basement. What kind of ritual would hold such sway? Isabella wondered, flipping further into the journal. The passages chronicled Lillian's increasing fixation, accounts of exhaustive research into the occult, books procured from distant lands, and consultations with enigmatic strangers who appeared and vanished like autumn leaves caught in a breeze. Power to transcend, Isabella whispered as she traced a passage with her finger. What were you searching for, Lillian? With each entry, Lillian's loneliness had grown palpable, a companion in her quest, something Isabella understood all too well. Feedback looped between anticipation and dread, Lillian speaking to powers unnamed, places unknown, in the hope they would respond. The basement, Isabella concluded, her gaze flicking towards the hallway where those stairs lay obscured, leading down into the underbelly of Eldermoor. Resolute to unravel the full picture, Isabella spent the better part of the afternoon absorbed in translating and decoding the diary's cryptic messages. Lillian had been thorough in documenting her journey, ensuring her legacy would whisper beyond her own downfall. As shadows stretched across the floor in the waning day, Isabella stood, clutching the diary carefully. She followed the stairs downward once more, her steps as sure as they were tentative. The basement embraced her in a cool draft, dampness clinging to the walls with indifferent permanence. A realm steeped in mystery and echoes of past residents, its very air seemed charged with anticipation, and the whisper of words left unsaid. Isabella moved through the basement by the glow of her lantern, its halo chasing shadows into corners, as though at once warding and inviting them near. She knew from Lillian's words of a hidden chamber said to house the greatest of the manor's mysteries. Skirting a stone pillar, Isabella halted as she noticed an archway, half concealed by time and darkness, leading further into subterranean depths. Her heart drummed a steady symphony in her chest as curiosity and apprehension wove together in a duet to guide her forward. The room Isabella uncovered was vast, yet claustrophobic, dominated by a stone altar at its center, cold, forbidding, its surface etched with symbols that seemed to ripple beneath her gaze. It was a space of ritual, unmistakably so, its walls carved with glyphs she had only half recognized from Lillian's descriptions. Isabella shuddered involuntarily, haunted by the echo of footsteps not her own as she explored, an ancient song threading through her senses. Here was the heart of Lillian's obsession, the nexus of her fervent hope and slowly twisting despair. Standing before the altar, Isabella wondered at the lives touched by these same stones, those who had sought salvation or doom in measures she was barely able to comprehend. Did they merely unlock what should have remained hidden, or had they tapped into a world unseen, yet perceptibly felt by those open to its call? Lillian, she whispered into the silence, what did you see here? What did you summon in these tomes? For each mystery uncovered that night, more sprouted in their wake, each answer leading to new questions. Her mind raced with possibilities and foreboding as she lingered there, until, burdened both by discovery and the weight of history, she retraced her steps back towards the comforting ambiguity of the surface world. thistles of night brushed against the manor when she emerged, leaving Isabella fatigued but unyielding in her resolve. The manor was a labyrinth not just in its architecture, but in its soul. A soul she was determined to understand, to set free. As she prepared to rest, the diary beside her on the sofa, she reflected on the lives interwoven with the story of Eldermoor, Lillian's obsession, Edgar's quiet observance, and her own yearning completion, all threads pulling taut around the manor's heart. Well, Isabella said to herself, a determined glint lighting her eyes against the manifold shadows. If this place has further secrets, I'll see them revealed, both for Lillian and for whatever truth binds us all. But beneath her ambition lay an undercurrent of unease. Eldermoor held more than memory. It held story upon story unwritten, hidden amidst whispers in the night. And Isabella knew her parting revelation before sleep pulled her under, that she too was becoming one of those tales, her heartbeat merging with the house's eternal thrum. Her task was no longer just an investigation. It was a pilgrimage into the depths of time and darkness. And where it might lead, even she dared not yet predict. Isabella stood at the top of the staircase, its stairs yawning into the inky blackness of Eldermoor's basement. In her hand, she held Lillian's diary, a beacon of obsession and the map to secrets unknown. The air was cooler here, tinged with a mustiness that seemed older than the walls themselves. A chill crept up her spine, one that had nothing to do with the temperature. She could almost feel the eyes of the manor upon her, watching, waiting. Yet this was no time for hesitation. Steeling her nerves, she clicked on her flashlight, its beam slicing through the gloom as she began her descent. Her footsteps echoed in the narrow stairwell, a lonely sound that seemed to chase her every step. The diary's words whispered in her mind, urging, tantalizing, teasing the margins of her courage. "Lillian," she murmured, her voice softer than the rustle of time-dusted pages. "What did you find here?" The basement unfolded before her in layers, its labyrinth designed not just to confuse but to entrap, to bind those who walked it in its silent embrace. Dust swirled in the wake of her light, driven into spectral dances before settling back to darkness. With each cautious step deeper into the manor's crypt-like bowels, relics of the occult emerged, dotted along stone niches and crammed into alcoves. Isabella paused by a derelict altar, its surface marred by time and markings that made no sense yet felt disturbingly familiar. Symbols, sigils that Lillian had highlighted in her diary, scattered like haunting constellations, each connected by lines of obscure meaning. The air pulsed with a rhythm that Isabella could almost feel rather than hear, a semblance of life bound into the walls. "What did you bring here, Lillian?" Her question seemed to trail into the shadowed recesses as she turned to edge deeper still. The flashlight flickered unexpectedly, drawing her focus as the light dimmed and flared back to life. Her heart stuttered at the apparent assault from unseen hands, solidifying her conviction that she was not alone. "It's just the batteries," Isabella reassured herself, exhaling slowly to ease her racing pulse. Just a trick of old, worn technology, yet even as she spoke her truths, the notion trembled at the edge of certainty. The air pressed in closer, like a breath held in suspense, waiting to be released, drawing her into its southern memory. It was then that she felt it. An awareness, disquieted yet inviting, a sensation as vivid as a turning gaze, pinning her in place. The sensation of being watched enveloped her, prickling her skin as though the very shadows clustered to see. "Who's there?" she challenged, her voice resonating off the walls, but receiving no acknowledgments in return. The flickering light played tricks on her eyes, revealing concealed shapes only to dissolve them into mirages. An ancient ritual of darkness turned playfully elusive in the confined space. Isabella tightened her grip on the flashlight, compelling herself to push forward, her pulse matching the frenetic flickering of her light. This was the crux of Lillian's legend, the depth from which legends might spring. Within her reach lay what remained of ceremonial implements, chalices overturned, delicate carvings worn smooth by time. Each was an artifact of intention, open to interpretation, imbued with the fervor of forgotten use. She bent to lift a small talisman from its resting place, feeling warmth in its time-worn contours. The object thrummed faintly, singing in resonance with the diary's secrets, soothing and unsettling in equal measure. As Isabella traced the sigils upon its surface, the whisper of movement brushed against her consciousness. Insubstantial, like the corners of dreams receding from the dawn, the air grew suddenly still, as if awaiting the catalyst. Her discovery, the axis upon which that darkness balanced. "Are you here, Lillian?" Isabella called, her voice softer now, but tinged with urgency, seeking understanding within this tomb of intentions. Only silence followed, echoing like the sound of an unshed tear. Drawing a deep breath of dank air, Isabella turned, light skimming the stones before dancing over something more deliberate. A door, half hidden, its wood darkened by time yet intricately carved. "What lies further within this web of whispers?" she asked, feeling a compulsion to open it, stepping across the threshold between what Lillian once sought and what she herself could discover. The door creaked on its hinges as Isabella tugged it forward, swinging inwards to reveal a chamber cloaked in shadow deeper still. Knowledge, she imagined, yet unbroken in slumber, haunted each corner. The moment pulsed with life, sensing change. Isabella alive with purpose, yet aware of apprehension she could neither name nor dispel. Here, at the heart of secrecy and obsession, in this place where reality and spectral imminence weaved together like the twilight promises, Isabella felt herself unraveling. Her flashlight flickered erratically, illuminating moments of mysterious truth before plunging again into comforting darkness. With each heartbeat a cascade of breathless anticipation, she took a step forward, one step into the narratives bound to Eldermoor and its lost souls. A presence stirred within the chamber, affirming both her fear and her readiness. A communion of time and spectral echoes that felt like destiny, etched as vividly as any shadow. In accepting this silent invitation, Isabella knew she would walk paths old yet undreamt, traversing the line between her own story and that of those who whispered, "This is where revelation dances." Determined now, Isabella embraced the depth, stepping boldly into the intertwining shadows to face the mysteries that awaited, knowing her journey was but truly begun. Isabella's breath came shallow as she slowly moved deeper into the chamber, her flashlight flickering weakly, casting leaping shadows upon the bare stone walls. The faint odor of incense hung in the air, ancient yet persistent, hinting at rituals long past yet never entirely abandoned. "This must be it," she murmured to herself, her voice bouncing around the room like an unseen partner in a haunting waltz. The walls were a tapestry of cryptic symbols and glyphs, each painstakingly chiseled with a precision that transcended mere decoration. Isabella approached them cautiously, her fingers brushing lightly over the carved grooves that seemed to hum with latent purpose. These were drawn with intent, she observed, noting the meticulous arrangement that blended geometric precision with organic flow. More than just art, more like an invocation. In the center of the room stood a weathered stone altar, its surface mottled by age and discolored by residue of past ceremonies. Objects of mysterious origin lay scattered across it, chalices and bowls once brimming with unholy offerings, now emptied and silent. Isabella recognized some of the symbols from Lillian's diary, marking this space as a focus for the forbidden convergence that had occupied her thoughts so compellingly. The crossing between worlds, she surmised, voice softening as curiosity overrode any latent fear. How many lives did this quest for power consume? The room seemed to tighten around her with the weight of unseen history, pressing tales of ambition and desperation into her consciousness. A cruel allure weaved itself into the atmosphere, seductive in its promise of transcending natural boundaries. Bending to inspect the altar more closely, Isabella discovered remaining vestiges of wax that had dripped down its sides in rivulets, alongside crystalline aromatic residues that confirmed the ceremonial nature of what unfolded here. Scattered among these relics lay torn pages, their edges singed, hailing from books that whispered warnings through their absence. Isabella collected as many as she could, piecing together fragmented instructions and chants penned by Lillian or those before her. She spoke to the silence, a sanctuary for those who wished to defy the natural order. Perhaps Lillian believed she could reach into the otherworldly void, where death might be negotiated rather than endured. With each sentence translated, images formed unbidden in Isabella's mind, gatherings cloaked in shadow, intonations rising into a crescendo of echoing pleas, desperate attempts to open gateways between existence and oblivion. An unsettling realization dawned as she read on. The manor had once been a beacon, drawing to it those with hearts stirred by forbidden venture. Cultists whose ambitions intertwined with Eldermoor, turning its splendid decay into a mechanism for something far more sinister. At that moment, Isabella noticed something peculiar, a symbol previously unnoticed in the center of the floor, a series of concentric circles interlinked with semi-fading runes, suggesting both framework and folly. A portal, perhaps, she speculated, her heart thrumming steadily despite the chill in the room. An attempt to rend the veil between living and dead. She ran her fingers over the pattern, the stone cool under her touch, vitality pooling into her from its untold history. Questions piled upon one another, each demanding answers while the past unraveled before her. Driven by the need to comprehend, Isabella considered what she now understood, a desire to communicate, to conquer mortality's dividing line, to transform tragedy into power. Suddenly, the ambiance of the room shifted. The dim light from her flashlight caught another gleam in the stone, the reflection amplified into spectral brilliance cast from some unseen source. A phrase softly entered her mind from the fragments she'd rescued. To summon the beyond is to court oblivion itself. Address your desires with caution, lest the response sever the threads of understanding. Isabella spoke aloud in a reverent tone, almost as if saying a prayer to the very spirits whose world she sought so insistently to unveil. She imagined Lillian, driven by the belief that whatever gifts were granted would be worth the perilous cost. The room seemed to breathe in response, whispering to its mortal guest that its secrets were encoded in the marrow of its very being. Yet for all the power imbued within these symbols and the phantom rituals that played upon time's echo, Isabella recognized the unmistakable traces of fear, of limits surpassed and consequences unanticipated. "Were you of the same mind, Lillian?" she questioned, her words seeping into cracks of history and heartbreak. "Did you think you could control what lay beyond, or did you fall victim to your own creation?" Understanding danced just outside Isabella's grasp, her curiosity curious and tenacious, demanding pursuit. Here, where reality and myth coalesced, she lingered, poised on the precipice of revelation. The room, pragmatic yet eerily compelling in its intentions, waited as it had for years unknown, steadfast, wondrous in its mystery and its penchant to allure yet another seeker into its fold. Isabella knew this was but a fragment of the manor's tale. The task now was to thread it together, transforming separate tales into truth, understanding into narrative that, whispered or shouted, could span across time and certainty. Her resolve strengthened amidst the shadows, cradling the meaning of her newfound knowledge. She turned toward the path of her awakening journey. Leaving the ritual room behind for now, Isabella felt herself returning to the world of breathing life with a new resolve, her mind crackling with the energies unleashed, knowing she was uniquely poised to whisper Eldermoor's secrets into the waiting wind. The manor loomed above Isabella, the evening casting shadows that seemed to deepen its mysteries even as she made her way back to the ground floor. Her mind was a whirlpool of thoughts, entwined with the relics she had uncovered and the whispers they spurred. She paused at the foot of the grand staircase, catching her reflection in a tarnished mirror, a reflection altered by what she had learned, by the labyrinth of stories she now had to untangle and protect. Seeking more than shadows, Miss Mathers? The voice caught her unawares. Familiar yet unfitting of the usual hollow words echoed through unfamiliar halls. Startled, Isabella turned to find Edgar standing a little way off, unnervingly calm and silhouetted against the fading light from the front door. "Edgar," she began, feeling the need to confess, "I didn't hear you. The manor has been more revealing than I'd imagined." Edgar's eyes held hers, a steady gaze akin to deep waters. Eldermoor tends to unveil its secrets when least expected. "It's both blessing and curse," he replied enigmatically. "I have discovered them. The rituals, what they attempted here." Isabella faltered, curiosity mingled with an unaccountable urgency. The echoes, so many lives touched and intertwined by these incantations. A preternatural silence settled between them, broken only by the creak of wooden walls holding their breath in anticipation of what might come. "Desperation has driven many to the abyss," Edgar agreed, his voice gruff but sincere. "The manor calls to those it deems worthy of its truths, or torments, and somehow it called you." Isabella waited, sensing that Edgar had more to impart, knowing instinctively that she had been moving towards this moment since her arrival. "There's a reason I remain," he confessed finally. "I am its guardian, not against the living, but the waking spirits and those that seek entrance from beyond." The confession rang with somber truth. Edgar's stoicism had masked deeper connections to the manor, rooted in his every gaze and whispered word. "You're a guardian?" Isabella echoed, surprise painting her words. "Here? Protecting secrets from strangers, or keeping the darkness from spilling out?" "A little of both," Edgar nodded, "and more. The ritualists who gathered here sought to bridge realms, a portal dangerously close to fruition, requiring constant vigilance to remain sealed." As Edgar continued, Isabella felt the chill of the room grow, a gathering storm visible on his face, forged from years of solitary guardianship. Time and again, new seekers arrive, eager to push beyond mortal shackles. Each soul's intent bends reality, threads weaving together in nexus. Intent on hearing him out, Isabella prompted. "And what now? Has it changed?" A shadow passed over Edgar's expression, something nearing regret. "You unleashed echoes in the depths. The portal's seal weakens, drawn by the touch of discovery." The realization cut through Isabella, an object lesson imparted with more weight than surprise. Her actions, guided by curiosity, by the loud insistence of stories, had nudged the dangerous door ajar. "Can it be stopped?" Isabella inquired, urgency creeping into her voice. "What must be done?" "That's your task now," Edgar replied, his voice as firm as the stone beneath its halls. "Your presence here, the path you've walked, they grant you responsibility. The heirloom of Eldermoor's truth passes to you. Isabella's heart pounded with a newfound burden, responsibilities unasked for settling on her shoulders like years yet to pass. How can I bear this burden? Me, only a storyteller seeking echoes. Edgar placed a hand lightly on her arm, the sudden warmth startling yet reassuring. Because beyond reflection and recounting lies understanding, an anchor in the tumultuous sea. You possess that strength. Edgar, you're asking. Asking me to do something so much greater than I imagined, Isabella said, voice merging resolve with apprehension. How do I seal what was meant to be bound? Through closing the circle, completing the ritual once started, Edgar explained, steely determination fueling his words, and taking care to do it when the moon favors slumber overstirring. He led her to a wooden box, its sturdy lock rusted by time, yet magically unbroken. Herein lie the tools: ritual dagger, blessed stones, scrolls to guide your intent. Isabella accepted the box, its heft more than physical, infused with lifetimes of silence. What if I fail? She asked at last, expression shaded with doubt. You must not, Edgar uttered softly, with something nearing emotion breaking through his usual reserve. Failure would allow passage to forces we dared commune with, ones that do not reconcile passing into the night. Isabella, though fragile amidst revelation, felt resolve take root. Then I will do what must be done. I will finish what has been left afield, however fearsome the cost. Edgar nodded, the relief imperceptible but known between them. Should you succeed, know the manor's tether shall fade, releasing ghosts from their quiet haunt. As Isabella breathed in the resolve settling over her, Edgar squeezed her shoulder gently, affirming their shared charge. Be wary of the dusk, Edgar warned, retreating into his curtain of mystery. The twilight masks voices uncertain in purpose. Hearken only to the guidance of the manor's truth. With those parting words, Isabella felt grounded, her task defined yet daunting. As she stepped into the awakening night, burdened by challenge yet buoyed by faith, both her own and Edgar's, she was acutely aware of the path's inevitable challenge. While shadows danced ever nearer, bathing in the cool breeze of evening, Isabella turned resolute, footsteps marking resolve in tandem with stories past and task now. The portal's potential awakening tightened her grip on destiny's reins. Within those stone walls of Eldermoor lay memory and myth intertwined. Their echoes stretched across time, found an echoing counterpart in her own steady heartbeat. The manor was a maelstrom of time-worn secrets and looming shadows, a warren of history into which Isabella had willingly stepped. Now, pressed by the urgency of Edgar's revelation and the impending lore she needed to defuse, the manor felt more alive, every echo laden with anguish. Seated at the parlor's window, now her refuge and command post, she spread before her an array of papers, Lillian's feverish scrawls, diagrams of rituals, Edgar's cryptic quotations, and press clippings loosely rendered over the table's worn surface. There must be something we're missing, she whispered to herself, fingers brushing over the pages as though she might read their hidden truth by touch as well as sight. The diary held her focus, specifically Lillian's last entries chronicling the final preparations for that fateful, tethering ritual. Stars aligned, heavenly pathways. Isabella muttered as she pieced together fragments, connecting them to astronomical references and celestial maps tangled among the notes. Her finger hovered over a rendering of the ritual room, sigils labeled in Lillian's hasty script. Icons and symbols, each with a purpose yet unknown, awaited their orchestration. Taking a deep breath, Isabella recalled Edgar's words of unlocking and resealing, the moon, the moment, and the merging of elements. "You must realign them," she recalled Edgar advising, his voice echoing across memory and the stillness of the parlor. "The framework they created is an invocation. Repurpose it as an anchor." Isabella moved her focus to the talismans and relics arrayed within her grasp, each a component, a piece of the puzzle to secure that thin divide between worlds. A dagger, the embodiment of sacrifice; salt stones, the purity to ward; and scrolls, both conduit and chorus for words of command. She rubbed her temples, massaging the tension of knowledge hard won but not yet complete. "It's a delicate dance," she resolved softly, "the play between enacting and undoing." Casting a glance at the encroaching darkness outside, an empty canvas for the dance of shadows, Isabella knew that dusk's approach hastened her timeline. She could almost hear the manor's whisper, a beckoning call towards some impending fate. Leaving behind the safety of her sanctuary, Isabella moved resolutely toward the basement steps, the box Edgar entrusted to her tucked beneath one arm. Each step descended into a weight heavier than measured time, echoes whispering of her return to the threshold. "I'll do this," she promised herself, and the gathering dark, igniting her flashlight with renewed resolve. Returning to the ritual room, she acknowledged the flicker of potency, vitality thrumming in the stone's breath, its air thick with anticipation, an uncanny sense of acknowledgement as she crossed the chamber. By the altar, Isabella set the box gently upon its chilled surface, spreading maps, stars, and sacramental instruments across its breadth. She sensed continuum within the relics, their stories as imperishable as written text. "Lillian," Isabella murmured, her voice resonating purpose wrapped in familiarity. "Perhaps we'll share this task, across and between our time's tether." With deliberate motions, Isabella carved the air with the dagger's blade, symbols lit by moonlight sifting through unseen spaces, unveiling the manifold worlds, opening to closer possibility. Then came the arrangement of salt stones, laid in pattern, exalted by rites forgotten but retained in marrow and mantle. Their placement demanded precision, marked by star and glyph, paths carved into memories embracing potential. Sweat glistened on Isabella's brow as she unfurled the scrolls, their words between ancient language and new understanding, each syllable a spark to tether cosmic fault lines or jaunt across the grain of time. Slowly, Isabella spoke them aloud, repeating them like the pulse of a mantra, both reverent and profane. "Words of sealing," she intoned, her voice growing stronger, lifted beyond the fraying breath of time. "By the bind of celestial ties, by the circle's resolute spine, by sacred words I sanctify. The bridge closed, elder of design." As her seeping words filled the chamber, the room danced with life yet unseen, as if spirits swirled beneath her sublime tethering. Shadows leaped and cavorted, weaving existence from within their depths, translucent tendrils entwining within patterns on stone, a tangible now created by the merging of past longing and present acknowledgement. The knife gleamed in trembling luminescence, rainbow tinctured, alive with energy converged upon a single point spilling into Elysian resolve. 2666A's Isabella completed the invocation. She felt the final syllables escape, linger, and settle. Around her, the light sparked and feathered, the air shivering under the weight of equilibrium regained. With each breath, echo after echo dissipated into the embrace of silence, its rhythm harmonizing countless stories once fractured, but now securing resolution. "Did we seal it, then?" Isabella whispered in the abrupt stillness, noting the heaviness within the chamber recoil back into the stone. The room, emptied of intent, seemed somehow lighter, yet not unguarded, as new harmonies wove their way into its memory, memories among which Isabella forged her place. Exhausted but resolute, She collected the remaining relics, their time of purpose sealed within the vault of their rest, trail a step toward the doorway, where mingling threads brought forth stories both new and untold. "You took steps beyond measure," she said quietly, conscious of Lillian's essence mingling with her own as she ascended beyond Shadow's embrace. Emerging into the twilight, her heart settled. Isabella crossed toward the Manor's embrace with graceful certainty, knowing past, present, and future were interconnected and soothed by the cadence of stories shared, witnessed, and willed in Eldermoor's nameless repose. With the final strains of dusk yielding to dawn, she welcomed the eventual warmth of absolution that awaited, a conclusion crafted not by singular design, but through voices synchronously entwined. The walls of Eldermoor pressed in around Isabella as she made her way back into the cellar's depths, the air thick with an otherworldly weight she could almost taste. Her pulse quickened in her throat, the rhythmic drum of her heartbeat a constant reminder of the task ahead. With each footfall, the shadows seemed to close in, shifting, dancing just beyond the edge of light, twisting into shapes that toyed with perception. Isabella felt them peeling away at the veil, reaching with tendrils of eager anticipation from something darker. Clutching the woven talisman Edgar had given her, she reminded herself, this is what it's all been leading to. I can do this. Yet under her breath, even those words trembled with uncertainty. The basement air was fouler than before, laden with the bitter tang of some force unyielding and impatient. As Isabella reached the ritual room once more, she was met not just with relics of past ceremonies, but something else, something far more immediate. Centered in the room was a form, its figure indistinct, yet profoundly present, a shadow cascading in upon itself, oscillating, resonating with a malign energy that pulsed through the chamber as though it were breathing. "Who are you?" Isabella demanded, voice edged with defiance as she held the talisman aloft. From the depths of that shivering darkness came a voice like rusted iron dragged across stone, growing louder as it seemed to form. "Who am I? I am the consequence." The entity took a step forward, rippling between solidity and smoke, weaving through the familiar symbols as if born of them. "You are only here because of them," Isabella countered, talisman held steady despite the tremor in her hand. An echo of what they tried to manipulate. Laughter, a sound colder than death's whispered breath, wrapped itself around her, the tension in it palpable and suffocating. "Manipulation needs substance," it intoned, stretching its form across the sigils etched into the stones. "They gave me form and purpose. Frail humans seeking power beyond their grasp always leave echoes." The marks across the floor writhed, energized by the presence. As if feeding upon memory itself, it grew in substance, a specter more menacing with each stolen breath. Isabella held firm, her mind racing for the solutions whispered in Lillian's diary, the echoes warning of dire consequences born from imbalance. "You can't exist here." Her voice was developing strength, unwavering before the entity. "You were a mistake, born from misplaced intent and desperation, not my guilt to hold." "Sacrifice," it breathed with malevolent glee, shimmering in and out of focus. "Lives lost to inept attempts, yet their debt is yours." Isabella realized its intent, to overwhelm through doubt, her mind the battleground where history replayed, drawn into the cyclic nature of its sinister creation. Determined, she shifted her intent to that of restraint. Drawing forth the words she had painstakingly pieced together, she cast the talisman toward the entity, the woven artifact now imbued with renewed strength and purpose. By echoes stilled betrayers' tongues, by balance, harmony shall flow. By strength of will, with courage wrung, begone. Foul echoes, end your woe. As her words rose, the air thickened, electrified by forces revealing their own reluctance to disperse. The entity wavered, recoiling beneath the potency of words intertwined with past failures corrected. With an anguished wail, it flared outward, each scream dragging lines of reality in its wake, tearing them asunder only to spot them, shaken yet intact. Your reckoning was folly sown, Isabella asserted, her strength growing with each utterance brimming with exorcism. There is no dominion here, no passage. Drawing nearer, she wielded conviction as both sword and shield, feeling time peel away, layers of unmade corruption. The shadow, once a creature of incomplete formation, shuddered beneath her defiance, lines of fear fracturing across its presence, slivers of its being evaporating into the dark. Leave, she commanded finally, unleashing the emotional weight of every soul bound in vain hope. Leave them and return to void. Its final sounds remained, forlorn, desperate, all that was left of a malevolence dissipating, undone by the very unity that spawned its gambit. The shivering, shape-shifting being gave one last defiant screech before shattering, reality clawing it back into the nexus of unformed essence. In the silence following, there lay peace not yet encountered, a continuum gratefully restored. Shadows receded to familiar places, danced from recognition into picturesque obscurity. Exhausted, Isabella collapsed to her knees, relief spreading warmly through her senses as the adrenaline receded. Within the sacred stillness of the room, a place tethered once to fear but now to freedom, she uncovered her own god. Kind resolve. You did it, she whispered breathlessly, fighting tears of release, of survival. Lillian's influence mixed with hers, the guardian's boon gifted in return. As the chamber exhaled final shudders of disruption, and reality stitched itself whole anew, Isabella stood with replenished strength, aware that this unleashing was but one part of the design. The future she painted upon the storied tapestry still loomed unknowable, yet widget-filled, empowered by shadows observed and unmade, painted with brushes of forgiving serenity. Walking through illuminated hallways anew with certainty's echo in her heart, Isabella knew she had truly, and finally, brought the tale of Eldermoor Manor, past, present, and imagined, home. It was as if time had chosen to hold its breath within the cryptic embrace of Eldermoor Manor, allowing all events to unfurl within its eternal dusk. Isabella lay on the cold floor, the detritus of the climactic confrontation scattered around her like so many fallen leaves. Each breath she took felt heavy in her chest, mingling exhaustion with triumph. Slowly, the world came back to focus, refracting into the realm of the living. The dim light reflected off the stained altar, now innocuous, deprived of the sinister aura that had once emanated from within its core. Her surroundings seemed drained, not simply of menace, but of anything at all. Emptier, quieter, like a sigh released. Gathering the remnants of her strength, she propped herself against the altar, drawing the diary closer with a nod of gratitude to what had been Lillian's posthumous guidance. "Lillian," she whispered, thoughts coalescing amidst fatigue. "Without you, without your words, this evil might have won." Outside, the subtle shift of shadows heralded the approach of dawn, light spilling over the horizon with determination, and something akin to rebirth. Isabella's body ached with the toll of exertion, yet within her mind, clarity shone, lit by the fulfillment of stories disclosed, courage honed under the press of greater forces. One by one, relics were gathered and placed, each testament a safeguard now amplified with protection against the other worldly breach. The talisman Edgar had gifted her sat quietly empowered atop the altar, a token of resilience rather than submission, gleaming with the achievement they had accomplished together. The pages of Lillian's diary lay open, words swirling, incantations binding in their earthly scrawl as she traced them under her fingers. What had once seemed alien now stood proudly understood in the light of emergency. Her voice croaked, repeating the phrases that would grant safety once more to these ancient walls and its spirit guardians. By the forces held in balance, sanctify this circle whole. By protection summoned henceforth, guard ye spirits, keep ye whole. With each incantation released into the ether, Isabella felt the weight of countless eras before lift and realign, stardust forming its constant dance once more, allowing burgeoning light to unfurl, undisturbed. "It's over," she affirmed, the words as light and malleable as mist, melding with the atmosphere and etching their mark into the stone itself. As the final strains of shadow crept to their hiding places, she closed the diary, pressing it to her chest as she released her long-held breath. Isabella could almost feel the gratitude of spirits long bound too close to potential undoing. A quiet acknowledgement and farewell. The manor felt different now. Its essence pacified, it welcomed the returning weight of daybreak trickling through the stone windows. Once frightening rooms now held only the benign embrace of history, haunted still, but by lives remembered in peace rather than dread. With leaden limbs, she turned for the door, offering one last glance behind, capturing the memories twining in the crosshatch of her mind. In each corner, a story fulfilled. Time no longer constricted, released from the contracts of despair and hope. Isabella emerged from the basement, each echo of her steps satiated with completion. No longer captive to Eldermoor's hauntings, she left the manor's embrace behind, taking with her secrets laid bare, and then to rest, leaving only what ought remain behind veiled memory. The light of dawn shepherded her toward the promise of rest, the outside world a near-forgotten comfort. Reaching a presence at the cusp of tangible reality, a figure waited, resolute in silence. Edgar stood firm, his presence a sentinel monitoring the delicate transpiration of night into day. As Isabella approached, warmth spread through frozen extremities, an acknowledgement that both cost and reward had come full circle. "And so, it's done," Edgar said softly, a breath of wind, surrender, meeting understanding reflected in his voice. Isabella nodded, a smile trembling toward gratitude. "Yes, thanks to you, to Lillian. We did it." The elder custodian met her eyes with compassion. The basin breathes relieved. "My thanks, our thanks, extend beyond utterance." She embraced the fragility of dawn's encroachment, standing upon a cusp of exhaustion and deep-seated fulfillment. "Do you think they'll rest now?" Isabella asked, drowsiness threatening against relief. "They will," Edgar assured her with unwavering calm, their threshold sealed, and yours. Dark clouds stretched into pearlescent skies, weaving beginnings from the trailing remnants of night. Isabella found herself surrendering willingly to the grace of conclusion, more apt than her weary body could muster. "And me? What about my path? Fell short of theirs?" she queried, heart transparency bared for salvation. "You, Isabella, are they?" Edgar replied, confirmation unfurling like an old map no longer withheld. "Yours is the strength to harness stories into canvas, not of endings alone, but beginnings remade anew." Under these words, Isabella felt the world paint itself anew, stories scattered on memory's canvas, and then some large portion at root of birth, with the manor behind fading to whisper and wind. The light yet danced to create the patterns, as shadow bowed to its rising passage. Isabella entered a world pink with unuse, sheathed aflame with the possibility and memory entwining together. Her journey had not ended. It cast a light grandeur, outstretching its mystery net array. Realizing she was free, Isabella felt herself released from unseen chains, and that infinite harmony in expression stepped forward to meet her, wishing to cast lace breath of words into their haven unwind. Through all quite apparent, through the dark to its marvel, I have stories to tell, Isabella mused, depth suffused on her tongue, with light stepped into the color's dawn cast, a gift freely offered, freely welcomed, and above flight and gentle stir, the manor played soft, quiet, ambassadorial anthem to grown day. The city thrummed with its usual cadence, a tapestry of voices and machines interwoven into an urban symphony that was both familiar and suffocating. Isabella sat in her modest apartment, her writing desk awash with morning sunlight filtering in through partially drawn curtains. In front of her lay a blank page, a space waiting to cradle the echoes of Eldermoor and the stories it whispered into her soul. "This is it," she said quietly to herself, her fingers poised over the keyboard, ready to unwrap the bindings of memory and lay bare the narrative that refused to settle until told. The past few weeks had passed in a haze, the familiar chaos of urban life juxtaposed against the stillness left in the wake of her encounter. Nightmares of shadows lost and found had plagued her sleep, yet left her with a profound truth. Stories unspoken could become prisons of their own design. Her editors had expressed skepticism when she'd approached them with her account of Eldermoor. They wanted sensational but not absurd, curiosity without disbelief. "Even if they question," she whispered, "this is worth telling." Resolved, Isabella began to type, her words cascading like streams from the pool of her recent memory, flowing with the certainty of truth. In the forgotten reaches, she started, setting the stage with art and grace. Eldermoor Manor stood like a solitary sentinel, guarding its secrets with whispered promises, and the weight of past echoed against stone. Each keystroke amplified her purpose, transporting her back to that forgotten isle of existence where reality and shadow blurred. She described the hollowness suffused with history, painted with the brush of vivid appreciation. Her narrative traced paths through the manor's twisted corridors, revealing rituals born of desperation alongside hauntings stitched into the weft of time. She forged memories into meaning, the creak of floorboards beneath her feet, the resonance of Lillian's voice echoing from the still parchment of her diary. Isabella recounted her encounter with Edgar, revealing layers of clandestine wisdom beyond mundane recollection, illustrations of a connection as intangible as sand, but just as eternally binding. The doorways between realms may have remained obscured, but they are portals that exist nonetheless. She typed, parsing reality from the maze of metaphor, yet never once flinching from the truth that she had made poetry of their meeting. As Isabella dwelled on her confrontation with the entity, her fingers hesitated, conscious of the delicacy required to distill fear and defiance into prose. At the heart of darkness, we confront not what is unseen, but rather our latent power harnessed and unfurled. She wrote, knowing some dominions must remain featureless to those seeking their disgrace. Her recounting expanded to include her battle of will, a challenge that had transcended the boundaries of time to become one with the narrative she crafted, a battle spurred by strength born from facing echoes and embracing their truth. The climactic resolution painted shadows of brevity undone by the artisan's brush, impossible to hold yet necessary to share. By dawn's revisit, the manor lay sedate, secrets entrusted to their veil of memory, submerged beneath layers of history rewritten not by ink, but by choice, she concluded, evoking the end by tracing lines of an ever-widening circle of comprehension. With a click of the mouse, Isabella saved her document, truth woven into testament. Finished, she declared softly into the sunlight. Later that afternoon, she presented her manuscript to her editors, heart steady despite anticipation's slow build. Rick, one of the senior editors, eyed the title with an amused skepticism, his grin affable yet challenging. Eldermoor's Echo? Really, Isabella? You can't expect people to believe this. She met his gaze, her resolve as annealed steel. I don't expect belief, just curiosity. Fiction to those who see it that way. A true narrative for others open to what they can't always explain. Flipping through the pages, Rick sighed, a quieter understanding seeping into his gaze as he read over Isabella's meticulous prose. Gotta say, this is well crafted, he admitted. Might make people think even while they argue it's all made up, Isabella nodded, content that even skepticism fed into the broader tale, that reactions could span disbelief to profound reflection. Let's find a place for it, he relented, laying her manuscript among others to await its portals into reader realities. Days evolved, turning to weeks. The story of Eldermoor whispering its way into publication and beyond, creating ripples across the surface of collective consciousness. Readers responded with vigor, letters and emails flooding in, spinning threads between reality, fiction, hope, and fear. Some praised the eloquence and skill. Others seemed rattled by its depth, words echoing that persistent question of where reality ended and fantasy began. Isabella sorted through their responses with care, savoring those undulating currents of belief and dissonant skepticism alike. From her window, Isabella observed the city now cloaked in evening, vibrant hues transforming into a softer midnight quilt. She sat back with a satisfied sigh, holding Edgar's gifted talisman imbued with the weighty silence, now a sentry for her aspirations as a teller of stories untold and unrealized until courage unlocked them. In that moment, as dusk surrendered to night, Isabella understood that peace, elusive at best, was meant to be not simply found, but crafted again and again, out of shadows and into all that lay before her, still untold. A new story quietly began to stir within her thoughts, a narrative taking form, one informed by echoes that lingered, and told by the spirit she had only just begun to understand and share. And so, Isabella Mathers, chronicler of shades and shapers, leaned forward, renewed to greet the whispering shadows with words forged to breathe life and create worlds. Isabella leaned back in her chair, stretching her arms overhead while she surveyed the quiet intimacy of her apartment. The article that had consumed her for weeks now lay complete, a story captured in the woven tapestry of words bequeathed to paper. Her fingers lingered over the keyboard, contemplating the journey she had embarked upon, the strange resonance of Eldermoor now forever, with her in spirit and truth. A sudden thud against the floor snapped her from thought, a subtle intrusion upon the tranquil kiss that settled over the room. She rose from her desk, crossing the room towards the door, curiosity piqued by the unexpected delivery. Bending down, she grasped an unadorned envelope that had materialized upon the worn floorboards. Her name was inked across the paper in an unfamiliar, elegant script, the mystery of it igniting the faintest flicker of anticipation within. Carefully breaking the seal, Isabella extracted its contents, an ancient key, its metal surface pitted with age and secrets. She held it delicately, encased in the embrace of her palm, recognizing almost instantly the craftsmanship and design. It was a match to the vintage locks that adorned Eldermoor Manor's formidable doors. A breath caught in her throat, playing a minor chord of excitement and apprehension. The message was clear. Even as her article spoke of endings, here was an opening written anew. A return, she whispered, the word hinting at inevitability. The whispered echoes in her ear, shifting from imagined to tangible. With this key, Isabella understood more than simply ingress. It was an invitation, an opportunity undisguised and yet enigmatic. Was this implication of further unraveling yet another step within the manor's embrace? Her heart fluttered with that mingling refrain of curiosity and purpose, the journey not yet complete, the story unfinished. With her path illuminating ahead, she determined to take the first step forward again, knowing Eldermoor's mysteries were braided with hers eternally. Glimpsing fate twine within shadow through the partially open door, Isabella closed her hands around the key, setting the scene for a new beginning to weave into the complex tapestry of legend and life. And so, with resolve brightening the afternoon's glow, she whispered to the waiting wind, "Tomorrow I shall see where the key may lead."